Well, thank you so much. It's such a delight to be here, and that was a really kind and generous introduction. This is a really heavy topic for a Friday morning, but I promise you we're going to have some fun along the way. And, I've had some discussions already this morning about how, I don't know about you, but I feel as though day to day I'm constantly running from thing to thing, and I have deadlines approaching and deliverables that have to be met. And so to have the time to come together with people and actually take a step back and think consciously, not about the next immediate task that I have to do, but the future that we want to shape and create, that feels really luxurious, but it actually is something that should be absolutely essential. So I'm really excited to be here. I think that what is being done at Think 3000 is truly innovative. And so I'd like to thank everybody who's been involved in organising today, Think 3000 and RMIT, for having the vision to put something like this on. It's something that is very much needed. And following on from the comments, I do want to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend those respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today or watching online in the future. We're living through a period of really rapid transformation, and when you start looking at some of the challenges that are facing us locally, as a nation, as a world, it is really easy to just be completely overwhelmed by it. And to wonder, as an individual, if there's anything that you can actually do to make a difference, or if you should just go and hide under your doona, pull it over and try and forget what's happening. In that kind of environment, I really want to pose today a question that is, in my view, urgent, but also really personal to each of us, which is, what's the future of freedom and human rights? What do we actually want the world to look like in terms of rights? And are human rights built to last in a digitally driven economy of the future? When we think about the brave new world that we're creating, artificial intelligence can write, analyse and make decisions that were once entirely reserved to human judgment. Social media platforms influence elections, economies, and even our sense of identity and self. And the way that we work, communicate, and access information is being rewritten by algorithms that most of us aren't even really aware of and don't even really understand. The distinction between man and machine is becoming less clear, and questions about what it actually means to be human, which used to be purely the realm of science fiction, now feel very real. So the question I want to explore is, in that environment, the fundamental rights that we take for granted, privacy, free expression, fairness, equality, can they withstand that transformation? And I guess ultimately the question is, will the technology that we're embracing end up serving humanity, or will we become servants to it and be shaped by data, automation and algorithms? And my fear is that this isn't a question that we have the luxury of time to sit back and consider. It's something that's happening now. And the choices that we make today as students, as entrepreneurs, as policymakers, as consumers, will determine whether human rights will remain a foundation for our society or become something that just fades into history as a relic of a bygone era. And this isn't an abstract concern, because I think for everyone in this room, we've all grown up at a time where the international framework has just included the United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And because of that, I think most of us have lost sight of just what an extraordinary time we're living in when you look at the full arc of human history. So last year was the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it's really easy for us to forget what a milestone that document actually was, what a revolutionary idea is encapsulated in that document. To have the nations of the world come together and recognise in principle, if not always in practice, that basic rights and freedoms are the inherent birthright of every single human being, and to accept that human rights should be protected by the rule of law, and the government should actually limit and restrict their powers to preserve and protect those human rights. Even if that's an idea that we don't always aid in practice, that's a revolutionary idea. And the fact that we live in a world where that is a centrepiece is extraordinary and something that we shouldn't assume will always be the case. But I guess the point that I want to make by thinking back to the Universal Declaration being created is that human rights are something that are important. You would hope to hear a human rights commission say that, but they're not something that are inevitable. And so we need to think about what we have to do to preserve them and what they might look like in the future. Similarly, the idea that businesses might actually have a role in respecting human rights, that's actually a relatively new idea. It was only 15 years ago, or less than 15 years ago, back in June 2011, that Australia co-sponsored the resolution that adopted the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, the UNGPs. Since then, they've grown to become the authoritative statement, the authoritative global standard that outlines the role business has to play in preventing human rights abuses and respecting human rights in their business practices. That three-pillar protect, respect, remedy framework is relatively new, but it actually underpins a fundamental shift in the way we think about business and the role that it has to play in our world. So I guess what I really want to talk about today is the fact that throughout history, we've seen these technological changes that have led to really fundamental shifts in the way we live. We think about the printing press. It created knowledge, it allowed for the access to information, but it also fueled censorship and raised real questions about who gets to say what and when. The Industrial Revolution created huge wealth, lifted people out of poverty, which is an incredibly important human right. But it also exploited workers and created and fueled inequality. And the digital revolution today is no different. It holds enormous potential, but it threatens to introduce new risks that undermine human dignity and autonomy. And right from the beginning, before anybody gets the impression that I'm suggesting they'll throw away our iPhones and just stop engaging, I'm an optimist when it comes to technology. I fundamentally believe that technologies like AI actually have the ability to improve our lives and to strengthen human rights. But I can give just one example. Back in 2018, India achieved something absolutely incredible when they used facial recognition technology combined with AI for a trial run by the New Delhi police to identify missing children and reunite them with their families. In the space of just 4 days, they managed to reunite nearly 3,000 missing children with their parents. But that's an enormously powerful use of technology to achieve human good. And that pilot program ended up reuniting 10,561 missing children with their families after only 15 months in operation. That profoundly illustrates the positive impact this technology can have and the potential to strengthen human rights. So I'm not suggesting for a moment that technology or innovation should be embraced. Instead, my key message is that we have to ensure we use this technology in ethical and responsible ways. We have to have appropriate guardrails in place. We have to make decision-making transparent and accountable. And ultimately, we have to ensure we actually put humanity at the centre of technology, that we think about human rights, that we think about human impacts, that we don't just embrace technology because we can, but we think about whether we should and what that impact's going to be. For example, a moment ago I spoke about the New Delhi police trial that reunited kids with families. Hugely powerful. That same technology was also used to profile protesters at anti-government rallies, to identify them and to allow them to be prosecuted, which really highlights the point that technology itself is neither inherently good or evil. It's what we do with it that actually matters. And so when we're talking technology and human rights, the question isn't do we or don't we? The question is, how do we embrace it? How do we use it so that it actually furthers humanity rather than risking some of those fundamental freedoms? So let me give you some examples of the risks that are keeping me awake at night and that I really would love us all to be thinking about. Your privacy and surveillance is an obvious one. Every click, search and purchase that we make is tracked, and government and corporations collect huge amounts of data, often without us knowing or consenting. What happens when that data is used to manipulate public opinion, deny opportunities, or even predict and control human behaviour is something we should be thinking about. It can be used for enormously powerfully beneficial purposes, but it can also bring you a risk. Freedom of expression is another example. Social media gives everyone a voice, but it also amplifies disinformation, hate speech, and political polarisation. And the risks of censorship are significant. Who gets to decide who is allowed in the digital public space and what is allowed to be said? Whether this is government, private companies, powerful individuals, or even AI, it's something we shouldn't blindly walk into, but consciously think about what we want those parameters to be. The effect that technology, and particularly AI, is having on the types and quality of information that we receive is really significant. We're hearing cautionary tales with increasing regularity of AI chatbots hallucinating, spreading misinformation, producing biased content, and engaging in hate speech. Using generative AI means that it is cheaper and easier than ever before to run mass disinformation campaigns. And the use of deepfakes means that distinction between fact and fiction becomes increasingly difficult and isn't something that is just theoretical, because it has real impact on real people in the physical world. Even knowing whether we're interacting with a human or a machine is becoming increasingly challenging in online spaces. And this poses a particular challenge for democracies like Australia, because we rely on our citizens having access to truthful information and being able to make informed decisions, as well as trusting in the democratic institutions that form the basis of our country. At the same time, there's also another risk, which is that in our efforts to combat those risks, to combat misinformation, to prevent hate speech, to ensure fairness in online spaces, there's a real risk of different perspectives and opinions actually being targeted and censorship increasing. And so we need to ensure that we think about these things consciously so we can strike that right balance and ensure that we use technology to create online spaces that are fair and accurate and trustworthy, but that do allow a diversity of voices to be heard, don't suppress opinions we might not like, and we can protect freedom of expression at the same time as other human rights. To go quickly through a few of the other risks that I think we need to be thinking about. Economic inequality is not something we're talking a lot about when it comes to human rights in digital spaces. But actually, we do need to think about what technology needs for the future of work. And this is a human rights issue in that automation and AI are really reshaping the job market. And while some benefit from those opportunities, there are a lot of people who are being left behind. And building that fair, equal, successful society that we want to build means thinking about how we can use technology to shape progress, to create shared prosperity, rather than using it to deepen existing inequality. The last two that I want to touch on are bias and discrimination and human decision making. So when we think of automated decisions, as humans, we naturally think that machines will be more objective than we are. The gold standard when you have automated decision making is that it will make a decision free of the bias that often clouds human judgment. And yet we know that algorithmic bias means that AI tools can actually reinforce existing human bias and discrimination if they're trained on biased data or developed without diverse perspectives. This can lead to unfair outcomes, such as discriminatory hiring practices, biased law enforcement decisions, or unequal access to services. And an added element to that is the need for human decision making. Because while we have this faith in the idea that machines can do better than humans when it comes to making decisions that are free from all of those, biases and prejudices that we have, we actually need to think really deeply about whether we want technology to be making decisions that perhaps actually should be left to human judgment. A machine can't be held legally responsible in the same way that a human can. A machine can't be accountable in the same way that a human can. And a machine can't explain its decision-making process in the same way that a human can, with the opportunity to change that if it needs to be changed. And so while I think technology can be really useful in guiding and supplementing human decision-making, I think about things like deciding on guilt or innocence in a criminal trial, passing sentence in a legal process, or making a decision about targets in a conflict zone. They're decisions that we've already seen AI and technology starting to influence in different ways. And in my mind, they're decisions that actually should be left to human judgment. So while my message is we should embrace technology, we also need to think about appropriate times to do that and when we actually want to rely on human beings to actually make the final call. So these challenges don't have simple solutions, but one thing is really clear. We cannot afford to be passive observers when we're thinking about this transformation. We can't afford to just let it wash over us and wake up in a week, a month, a year to find the world's transformed into a place that we don't want it to be. And when I think about that transformation, really business is in the heart of it, because businesses aren't just participants in the digital revolution, they're actually the architects that are shaping it. And so I was really pleased to see today that there is such a focus on thinking about the role of business as we build the digital economy and what that means. Because with their vast resources and influence, some businesses these days having more of that than countries, they have a huge role to play, either in choosing to protect human rights or in potentially undermining them. And the question then is, well, what type of world do we want businesses to help us build? And I often think, when I think about questions of business and human rights, the quote from Herman Daly, who was an American economist, who said, the economy exists to serve society. The economy exists to serve society, not the other way around. Which means that in business, human impact should always be part of their thinking. And I just want to finish by quickly giving you 3 key themes that I think business should be thinking about in terms of human rights, the digital revolution, and where we might be going. And that is firstly, the power of ethical innovation. Secondly, corporate accountability and transparency. And thirdly, the future of work. So to look at the power of ethical innovation, again, technology is neither inherently good or bad. It's shaped by the values of the people who design and deploy it, which means that business can make conscious choices to build ethical safeguards into their products. So, for example, they can build AI systems to avoid discrimination and bias. Data privacy can be treated as a fundamental right rather than an afterthought. And social media algorithms can prioritise truth and civic engagement rather than sensationalism and division. If companies choose to prioritise ethical innovation, they can create technology that enhances human dignity and autonomy rather than undermining it. In terms of corporate accountability and transparency, the digital economy thrives on collecting data. But too often, data is treated by companies as personal information that they own rather than information that's actually owned by the individuals whose it is. That has to change. We need to actually make sure that there's transparency around how data is collected, used and stored, that we have guardrails in place that reflect the digital world that we live in, rather than privacy laws, for example, that are a relic of a bygone era. And we need users to not only have control of their personal information, but to have real alternatives if they don't want to sign on to those terms and conditions, if they don't want to engage in selling their own data. There need to be alternatives provided to people that are easy, accessible and realistic. And I think the core message here that I want to give is, it's great to hear a Human Rights Commissioner stand up and say businesses should think about human rights. It's a really nice thing to do. And every, the business person in the room is going to sit there and nod because nobody's going to say, no, we don't like human rights. But at the end of the day, there's a profit motive and we have to think about that. That's true. But my message here isn't just that we should believe in human rights and embed human rights in business practice because it's a nice thing to do and it makes us feel warm and fuzzy and morally it is the right thing to do. There's actually growing research that it's economically the sound thing to do. And increasingly we're seeing research emerge that shows us that businesses with a solid ethical foundation and a solid social license are businesses that make more money and are businesses that drive growth and are businesses that economically will survive and thrive because, not in spite of, but because of that moral grounding. For example, research conducted by the Danish Institute of Human Rights back in 2017 found that human rights have a positive and significant effect on economic growth. That in fact, they concluded a focus on human rights for business is not only the right thing to do in normative terms, but also the smart thing to do in economic terms. So it's one of those really lovely occasions where the moral and the economic actually combine together to create a really powerful case for human rights, not just being something that should be left to, the human rights people on one side, but actually it's a powerfully rational thing for businesses to engage with. And finally, I just want to say something about the future of work, because we know technology is transforming jobs across every industry. And there are fears in some areas that, there's a future where machines will replace humans entirely. But I think the reality is a lot more complex. And businesses have a real role to play in ensuring that technological progress doesn't just benefit shareholders, but also benefits workers and customers. So, for example, we need to think about how we reskill and upskill workplaces so that people actually have the ability to engage in the new role of work. We need to collaborate to create safety nets for workers who are displaced by automation, because it's not as simple as saying there are new jobs created over here, then the people you're talking about aren't in that place. And we need to really ensure that we think about ethical labour practices in the full economy, which includes the gig economy, digital platforms, and things like the training of AI tools. One of my areas is modern slavery and anti-trafficking. And there are real concerns out there about the labour conditions that are driving the development of these technologies and the training of AI tools and systems. And it's something that's hidden in plain sight, but we actually need to address. So having gone through all of that, which is really heavy content for a Friday morning, where do we go from here? For all of you who are students in the room, you're entering an era where technology and ethics are inseparable. You'll be the engineers who build the next AI systems, the entrepreneurs who shape corporate culture, the lawyers who define digital rights, and the consumers who hold businesses accountable. The choices that you make, what you build, what you buy, what you demand, they'll shape the future of freedom in a digital economy. And the question that you need to ask yourself is, are you willing to accept a world where human rights are sacrificed for convenience? Or are you wanting to build a world where technology actually serves humanity and not the other way around? I have an answer to that question, but ultimately each of us need to be thinking about that and the choices that we make and the impact that we'll have. I really strongly believe that human rights aren't just things that we should accept becoming relics of the past. They're actually the foundations of the shared future that we want to create. But they won't happen by chance. Human rights don't just exist forevermore without us ensuring that we're actually prepared to protect and defend them. My view is that the digital revolution doesn't have to come at the expense of freedom. And in actual fact, it can be used to facilitate and expand and strengthen human freedoms and create a more fair and equal world. But to get there, we have to demand accountability. We have to embrace ethical innovation. We have to commit to fairness. And we have to create a future where human rights aren't just an afterthought, but something that we consciously seek to build into what we do in our day-to-day lives. The products we buy, the products we develop, the products we design, the things that we do in every step of the way. So, the closing message, I think that we need to embrace the future in terms of the technology, everything that's changing, all of the unknowns that are ahead of us. But we have to make sure we do it in a way that puts human beings at the centre, that we don't just accept that change will necessarily lead to human rights becoming a relic of a bygone era, and that we actually start to demand a world where human rights are actively protected, defended and expanded into the modern world, and so become things that aren't just left as an afterthought, but are a core part of the future that we want to build together. So I might leave it at that because I know we're starting to run out of time. I promised that I wasn't going to speak right to the end, so we could have some questions if we wanted to. But thank you so much for having me here today, and hopefully I've given you some food for thought.